let's move on to the first speaker, who you can see from your list in front of you, is Tyrone Edwards. Tyrone's been a long-standing friend of Pharma's and of mine personally. He spent 26 and a half years at Merck, which is an impressive stint. Finally left as senior vice president and was particularly involved in sales. Most recently, he's actually been responsible for his own healthcare consultancy called IMA Life Sciences, and I believe he's been doing some incredibly interesting work there. If you obviously want to find out more about that, then you can get in touch with him afterwards. So, Tyrone, I'm going to hand straight over to you, and Tyrone will deliver a short presentation for us.
Thank you so much, and greetings to everyone on the line. I'll take just a few moments to take a couple of slides to remind all of us of, given the various markets that are represented on this call, what are the conditions that are in place today that we have to think about as each of us as trying to provide value to our respective customers and stakeholders in each of our markets. And so on our first slide, this is just a reminder to all of us that in many markets, there are multiple changes that are afoot. For example, in the U.S., one of the biggest changes, obviously, to come along in the U.S. is the Affordable Care Act, which was recently upheld, many parts of it upheld by our largest court, which means that what it really means for us in the U.S. is that the bar around delivering on outcomes has been raised greatly, particularly health economic outcomes, as more and more reimbursements are tied to ability to achieve certain kinds of outcomes. In many markets represented on this call, the ability to get a new chemical entity approved in markets is no longer as certain as it once was. And so that is clearly an issue that is at the front of us. And the uncertainty oftentimes is not always tied to the efficacy of the new chemical entities that we are researching, but oftentimes it is tied to the health benefit and the health economic benefit of the entities that we are seeking to bring into in various markets. The less we're able to demonstrate a greater value proposition, that obviously puts a lot of pressure on the reimbursement models in the various markets, again, that are represented on this line. We also know that in many of the markets that are represented on this line, there's going to be an increasing, if not already increasing, use of electronic medical records, which then means that the ability to be able to track outcomes is only going to increase exponentially as more and more countries begin to standardize the use of electronic medical records. We also have seen that in many of the markets that we have had exposure to, there's a growing use of social media. And because there is a growing use of social media, pharma companies and healthcare companies are somewhat losing control of the opinions that they're able to help guide and shape for the healthcare providers. And so it is important for us in the industry to really understand social media and how better to manage it in order to help guide opinions and guide perceptions on the value that we can deliver in various markets. Let's take a look at our next slide. And on our next slide, what we tried to capture is dropping down from the concerns at the macro level of the industry, taking a little closer look at when we talk to healthcare providers in different markets, what are they telling us that are their top concerns? And the top three concerns that I've listed here are really pretty universal across many of the markets that we work in. And what we find is that providers continually are wanting to make sure that they are up to speed on the latest in technology, information, and data so that they can best serve the needs of their patients and their constituents. And in doing so, they are being able to bring value to their constituents and look smart to their constituents. It is also important that we think about how we help healthcare providers with the image that they're trying to build for themselves among their peer group. And that's going to vary from market to market, but it is awfully important that we think about, as we not only talk about our products, but the services that we bring to market, how do we make sure that the healthcare providers that we're targeting are able to build, again, their reputation within the market. We do know that optimization of time is a major issue with many of the healthcare providers that we talk to. This is especially true in the more mature markets that are represented on this call. because we're finding that in the more mature markets, physicians and providers are being asked to do more in order to maintain a level of reimbursement that they are used to, and that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on how they optimize their time. We also know that in many markets, there's a big concern about the ability of the individual practitioner as well as the group or associations that they practice within, their ability to be able to generate sufficient reimbursement and income so that their business models are able to maintain profitability. So again, this really begs the question, these two slides beg the question, if you're sending your sales representatives in to talk to healthcare providers, what are they talking about? So let's take a look at our next slide. The traditional model on the next slide, has been that you would send your pharma sales representative in to talk to a healthcare provider about your product. And for many years, this approach has served our industry very well. In fact, we have lots of models that show the return on the value of having sales representatives promote our product. However, many of us, and I'm sure most of you on this call, have begun to see a flattening out of the value curve associated with standard traditional product promotion. And that means that the way that we are traditionally promoting our products to physicians is less and less valuable to our target audience. The result of this has been, because there's so many traditional pharmaceutical approaches and representatives in the market, and the targets are seeing less value, they are seeking other alternatives to understand value in the market. And that means that because of price pressures and our inability to always demonstrate value, that the traditional technology sometimes has begun to be more widely used in many markets because, again, we have failed to demonstrate true value beyond just the products that we represent. So it does beg the question, if the traditional model of using a pharma representative is beginning to lose its value and is no longer able to truly help us differentiate ourselves, our brands, and our approaches in the market, what is an alternative approach? How do we get our healthcare providers to see value in what we're offering beyond just the product themselves? So let's take a look at that on the next slide, and I believe this is my last slide, and this will set up the discussion that we want to have for the time that we have left. Our research shows that when you speak to customers and you ask them, how do you differentiate yourself in the market? We are finding that it's no longer just about the promotional messages and the individual products that we represent. So clearly what we've been able to find in our research is that the brand that we represent in the market account for 20% of the differentiation that we're able to create in the market. So that's still very good, but it means that each company has the opportunity to distinguish itself based on how you invest in your brand. The products and the services that we bring to market are still important today, but as you can see on this slide, 20% of the time we're able to create differentiation through the products and services that we bring to market. Now, this is particularly troublesome because many companies today still singularly rely on just their products to create differentiation in the market. But yet the customers are saying to us, products and services alone are not going to create differentiation in the market. The result of that is that when you look at and you ask customers of their perception of price to value, their price to value perception has dropped to now that it's only about 10% of the driver of differentiation. So the question becomes, how are we going to create differentiation in the market? And this the last bar in this slide really is the jumping off point or the speaking point for the rest of our time together. Because our research suggests that differentiation is going to come from the sales experience that as companies we're able to take out to our target audiences. And bear with me just a moment as I define a sales experience. Sales experience is our ability to deliver a unique perspective to our target audience. That unique perspective is not just about your product. The unique perspective is about your product, but more importantly, it's about the disease, the patient, and how the healthcare provider can more efficiently, effectively manage the outcome. We also find that the experience is tied to our ability to be able to demonstrate and teach the provider something new. Now, teach here isn't in the context of the disease only themselves. Teach here is in the ability to be able to achieve outcomes differently than the standard approaches using older technology that exists today. And then lastly, what our research finds is that the healthcare provider understands that there are a lot of alternatives in the market, and they're looking for someone to help them to understand the risks associated with the various alternatives and to help them to avoid potential mistakes, which obviously are detrimental to patient outcomes, but also their reimbursement model. So all of this suggests that for pharma companies, we have to begin to think of how do we service our value proposition beyond just the product and think about different approaches beyond just the product itself and to ramp up the service side of our products and solutions that we take to market. So let me stop there, and Paul, I'll turn it back to you to open up for further discussion.
Thank you very much, Tyrone. So that has indeed given us a good foundation. 53%, that number there, it's not insignificant at all.